Hey everybody, it's Jim here, and this week we're going to be talking about another Fender offset guitar that I have a great deal of experience with. This time it's going to be the Fender Mustang. Now, in case you missed last week's first episode where I'm going to be going over the guitar models and telling you what I like and dislike about them, I want to be upfront again. There is going to be no playing of this instrument in this. It's just going to be talking. If you would like to hear what this guitar sounds like, I'm going to leave a link right up here. I did a shootout between this and a Fender Custom Shop Mustang, a really rare guitar in its own right, and I found that to be very interesting if that's your thing. But for today, I just want to talk about what I like about these guitars and things I wish that were a little bit different. To begin with, we started with the Jazzmaster last week. Immediately, there are a few things that are very different from the Jazzmaster. The first being the actual scale length of the neck. This is a 24-inch scale length. Now, it's really slinky, and some players actually prefer that. One way, in case you weren't sure if you have a Mustang, you can alter how much string tension there is to an extent by the height of the cigar bar, which is this guy right here. But I love the short scale of this neck. It really brings out its own character, and unlike the Jazzmaster, if you're somebody that's used to playing a Tele or a Strat, this definitely feels a little bit different at first, but in a good way in my opinion. And while I'm on the topic of short scale guitars, when this was released in 1965 by Fender, this was not the only guitar available with a shorter scale length than the typical 25.5. You also had the Music Master and the Duosonic. Now those two, 22.5. So some people think that this is a very short scale length, and it is if you're really used to the traditional one of a Strat or a Tele. However, 22.5, I've played a few of those. It is a trip. It feels like you're playing spaghetti strings depending on the gauge that you have. Another thing I love about these guitars has to be these switches. Now, if you're not familiar with a Mustang, you might be, a little bit intimidated. You shouldn't be. This one only controls the neck pickup. When it's in the middle, it's off. This one, the same exact thing for the treble pickup. It's really cool, and it's one thing that when you look at one of the modern Fender Mustangs that's available from the USA, actually the only one that the United States factory makes in production outside of the custom shop, the Performer, that has a three-way toggle switch, and it lacks these switches, so you're unable to get one of the key sounds of one of my favorite parts of this instrument, and that is that super wacky out of phase with both the pickups. It quacks, it honks, it is just such a cool tone, and whenever you hear it, if you're trained to know what a Mustang is supposed to sound like in that position, it sticks out like a sore thumb in the best way possible. Now, I don't think it would be out of order for me to say that Leo Fender was an absolute genius, and one of his innovations that I really love about this specific guitar was the Vibrato System. Some people, they don't really care for it. They think that it's something you're not going to be able to keep in tune very easily. It's a little bit of a hassle. And more importantly, if you were used to playing a Jazzmaster or playing a Jaguar, this one, because of the arm length, you can alter it a little bit by raising it back and forth here, but it doesn't have the same kind of fluid motion to it. It sits a little bit closer to the body depending on how you have the cigar bar set up. For me, the optimum way to have the cigar bar set up with the tension I like, it leaves it so I'm like right here. There's not a whole ton of wiggle room, so I gotta really push down if I'm sitting and I'm playing this thing in order to use it, as opposed to the other two offsets. But when it's dialed in right, and they can be dialed in right, not that difficult, and it is a very reliable and very unique vibrato system. You can get a lot of the quick flips on it, and also the really smooth, almost Bigsy kind of textures, and I love it. Now, as far as the actual sounds of this guitar and the stock pickups themselves, I was born in the 80s. The first time I had ever seen a Fender Mustang being used was from a little band that was from the Pacific Northwest. And well, they didn't use it for the traditional purpose of the design of this guitar whatsoever. It just had gobbles and gobbles of gain on it. So a lot of people, when they pick these guitars up, don't realize the originals had lower output pickups on them. They might find themselves disappointed. Why does this sound so weak? And that's why if you're ever looking around in the used market, you might find yourself seeing a lot of humbucker sized single coil pickups, especially in the bridge position. But as far as the playing experience of a Fender Mustang goes, combining the shorter scale length of the neck with the kind of smaller body here, it feels like an extension of your body. It is something that if you like to play a lot of funk, or you like to play a lot of stuff like that where you're doing a lot of rhythm work, it feels like nothingness. It's like sometimes if I'm standing up and I'm playing this guitar, you add in the fact that this also is a very lightweight instrument. Typically Mustangs are about 7 pounds, a little bit over, outside of a few years in the CBS era in the 70s. They got a little bit heavy. But that being said, overall Mustangs, there's just not a whole lot to these guitars, so the weight is never really an issue. Smaller body, shorter neck, it's a joy to play. Now, as far as the cons of this instrument, I only have two. One of them cannot be avoided, and that is the fact that when you're messing with some of the coolest sounds possible that I was talking about earlier, that super out of phase sound, when you're playing live or you're tracking something, the ability to switch between multiple pickup configurations easily, because you're doing it horizontally as opposed to a Jaguar where it's vertically, it's easy for me on a Jaguar to just boom, flip the two together. But on these, if you could see, to do that on the fly and then not miss anything within the song, unless you have a little bit of an extended break, a few bars to kind of hang out and make the switch appropriately, it can get a little bit dicey. My only other complaint about the Fender Mustangs is it's been so long since Fender USA made a production Fender Mustang that was accurate to the vintage models. It hasn't been since the vintage models. The American vintage never included the Mustangs. The American originals never included the Mustangs. Yeah, you have the Vinteras, and yeah, thankfully you still have these beautiful made in Japan ones that come with the rosewood fingerboard, really capture the vintage aesthetic. However, I would have loved to see, or I would love to see, if anybody from Fender is watching this, an American vintage or American classic, whatever we're going to call the next line here, Fender Mustang. So my final verdict on the Fender Mustang, this is an amazing, amazing guitar design. I love it. It's my second favorite out of all the Fender offsets, ahead of even the Fender Jazzmaster that we covered last week. And I think that this guitar would be the perfect complement to a Telecaster player, because it does feel familiar in a few ways. Not with the scaling, but just the fact that it's a very lightweight guitar. The body's pretty compact. You do get the shorter scale, so you get a little bit of a slinkier feel to it. You get a really cool vibrato. You get lower output pickups. Mix those two together, it's a recipe for success in my book. And that concludes my take on the Fender Mustang. I want to give a special thank you to everybody who watches and supports this channel. Even if you don't click the like button, which I encourage you to do, especially if you like this video, do that right now. It helps more people be able to see this video pop up on their feeds and potentially be introduced to the channel, but also to the people that are members that have pledged a little bit of money monthly to be able to help me go forward and make little improvements here and there. We have all new lighting in the studio right now. I'm hoping that this is going to come out pretty well quality. I'm trying to up my game as far as the production values go, and also I'm going to try some things with editing. I'm not a pro video editor. I've only started doing that since this YouTube thing started about a year and a half ago at this point, but your support means the world to me. If you'd like to consider joining them, the button is down below. Different tiers are available to you, but that's all I have. Leave me a comment. Let me know what you think about the Fender Mustang. Let me know what your favorite offset guitar is, and we will see you next week. We're going to be talking about my favorite of them all, the Fender Jaguar. Until then, I hope you have a great rest of your day, everybody.